What's poppin', my playa Jaegers? It is me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. This is about to be a breakdown for the amazing Mech vs. Monsters film, Pacific Rim. Guys, I was freaking geeking when this movie came out in 2013, man. Like, as a huge Power Rangers fan, as everybody knows that I am, seeing Mechs vs. Monsters in live action literally made my entire life. So Guillermo Del Toro, hats off to you for making a masterpiece of a film. So without further ado, let's just jump into this thing. Now, there are few things in this world more satisfying than watching giant mechs fight giant monsters. And that is exactly what director Guillermo Del Toro achieved with his production of 2013's Pacific Rim. Screenwriter Travis Beacham actually came up with the concept for this movie while taking a stroll on the Santa Monica Pier and imagining what it would be like if there were giant mechs just standing on the coastline. And as soon as Travis got the ball rolling, Guillermo Del Toro was not far behind, as the legendary director was a huge lover of kaiju fighting media from Japan, as productions like Ultraman, Spectreman, and Giant Robo were foundational for Guillermo's imagination growing up. And they all very much fueled him into bringing the joys of monsters versus mechs onto the big screen with his unique vision. And the movie starts by showing us a close-up of the Breach, a rift in space-time located in the depths of the Pacific Rim. A rift that glows as blue as the toxic blood of the kaiju that emerge from these interdimensional portals to attack humankind, much like what occurs within Legendary Pictures' other monster universe with Godzilla and King Kong, as the MonsterVerse titans all have their origins from naturally occurring subterranean interdimensional portals to the Hollow Earth dimension. Then we are brought to the city of San Francisco on August 10th, 2013, a day that would go down in history as K-Day, the day of the first ever modern kaiju attack, when a kaiju codenamed Trespasser and nicknamed Axehead would purposely destroy the Golden Gate Bridge on behalf of their alien creators. And I feel like Legendary Pictures must have some particular beef with the Golden Gate Bridge itself, because in the following year, in 2014, director Gareth Edwards would show the Golden Gate Bridge being completely annihilated by the worldwide debut of Godzilla, an event known as G-Day in the Monsterverse. Trespasser/Axehead stood at a staggering 302 feet, weighed around 2,780 tons, and had a roar that could apparently be heard even from dozens of miles away. And this being the case, his arrival to San Francisco was apparently preceded by a 7.1 magnitude earthquake as a result of his big ass trying to make his way to the surface. Axehead would eventually be brought down by the US Army and British Royal Air Force through the use of nuclear missiles, with the resulting devastation at the end of the 6-day battle absolutely wrecking the US cities of San Francisco, Sacramento, and Oakland. Tendo Choi, the Shatter Dome technician played by actor Clifton Collins Jr., was actually working on the ferry that transported people between the San Francisco mainland and Angel Island when Axehead first attacked. And the tragedy that he witnessed that day is what motivated him to join the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps. The prequel comic Pacific Rim Tales from Year Zero, written by film screenwriter Travis Beacham, shows the attack from his perspective, and also shows how Tendo would lose his grandfather quickly after his grandfather was exposed to the blue blood of the Axehead kaiju, becoming one of the first victims of Kaiju Blue. Another core character that was affected by the San Francisco attacks was Idris Elba's Stacker Pentecost, as his sister was actually one of those Royal Air Force fighter jet pilots attacking Axehead before they were subsequently obliterated by the kaiju, motivating Stacker himself to join the Jaeger program down the line. But anyways, after Axehead is taken down, we can see that humanity has taken its head and placed it inside of a museum as a memorial to the tragic event. However, the following shot shows another kaiju attack occurring just 6 months later in the Philippines on February 5th, 2014, as the kaiju codenamed Hundun, named after the formless entity of Chinese mythology that embodies the chaos before creation, would trash the city of Manila real damn bad. And this is before Hundun apparently would leave the Philippines to head towards the shores of Japan, as we can see a giant footprint left by the creature on a Japanese news report that says the words "A monster attacked the houses near the sea" at the bottom of the screen. And shortly after this, we can see the bones of a third kaiju named Kaisef being transported by the John C. Stennis U.S. aircraft carrier, an aircraft carrier that was also featured in Michael Bay's second Transformers movie, when John Turturro's character would call the military for help with dealing with the Decepticon Devastator. Kaisef would attack Cabo on June 1st, 2014, and would be taken down with nuclear missiles that would wipe out half of the city. And the fourth kaiju attack would pop off not long after, on September 2nd, 2014, in Sydney, Australia, as that city would suffer a similar nuclear fate when the kaiju Sisher was taken down. However, it would be Sisher's attack on Sydney that would inspire Professor Jasper Schoenfeld to first think of the concept of the Jaeger program, after he was given a burst of inspiration from his son, who was play fighting with a toy mech and a toy monster while Jasper was watching the Sydney attacks on TV. And since nuking every city that a kaiju shows up in is not sustainable for the long term, Professor Schoenfeld would introduce his Jaeger concept at a kaiju conference in South Korea, and soon after would procure the funds to build a prototype. Professor Schoenfeld would then recruit Dr. Caitlin Lightcap to help him make his dream into a reality, as Caitlin Lightcap would go on to create the neural drift technology that is centric to piloting the mechs that Jasper and his team constructed. Caitlin would initially call the concept of bridging the human mind with technology the pons, which literally means bridge in Latin. Eventually, the project would start to bring in test pilots for their prototype Jaeger named Brawler Yukon. And one of those pilots was a dude named Sergio D'Onofrio, who almost died while attempting to merge his mind with the Jaeger all by himself. But luckily, Dr. Lightcap would save his life by entering the drift with him, allowing them both to pilot the Jaeger using their shared connection. The two would eventually fall in love, and Dr. Lightcap would end up becoming Sergio's co-pilot for the Jaeger Brawler Yukon, and the two of them would be the first pilots to kill a kaiju on April 23, 2015, when they took down the kaiju Karloff in Vancouver. Karloff was actually closely modeled after actor Boris Karloff, who played Frankenstein's monster in 1931's Frankenstein. But anyways, this intro then shows us a quick montage of humanity's victories against the kaiju, with the American Jaeger Romeo Blue being seen in the background of a news broadcast celebrating humanity's second Jaeger win. Standing at 225 feet and weighing 7,775 tons, Romeo Blue was the second Mark I Jaeger ever deployed in combat. The two twins that we see being interviewed during the talk show segment during this intro are Romeo Blue's pilots Bruce and Trevin Gage, aka the Gage twins. Together they fought and took down a kaiju named Hardship, making them American heroes and marketing inspirations, as Romeo Blue and the kaiju Hardship would even have shoes and toys modeled after them. And right after this, we get a shot of the 240-foot tall Japanese kaiju killer named Tacit Ronin, a 7,450-ton Mark I Jaeger piloted by Duke and Kaori Jessup that would go on to kill 3 kaiju before it was destroyed. And after this, we get a shot from a Japanese talk show where they've made a giant goofy version of the Kaiju Hundun. And on the bottom right corner of the screen, under the Japanese word amazing, is a cartoon version of Hundun facing off against the Chinese Jaeger Horizon Brave. Horizon Brave was originally piloted by Lo Hin Shen and Shishi Po, and on both sides of Horizon Brave's head are 2 giant cryo cannons that the mech would use to freeze their monstrous opponents. Then we jump forward to the year 2020 to the Shatter Dome, based in Anchorage, Alaska. It's the 7th year of humanity's war against the kaiju, and Raleigh and Yancey Beckett's 3rd year piloting the Jaeger Gipsy Danger. When they first joined the program in 2017, the two would fight and kill the Category 3 kaiju Yamarashi in the Danger's first ever kaiju battle. Raleigh would bring this up later on in the film when he notices that Charlie Day's Newt Geisler has a tattoo of the 2,500-ton Yamarashi on his forearm. And in 2019, the Beckett brothers would travel to Manila to dispose of a Category 4 kaiju with the help of Jaeger's Striker Eureka, piloted by the Australian father-son duo Herc and Chuck Hansen, and Horizon Brave. The Beckett boys are then awoken at 2 in the morning to prepare to fight a Category 3 kaiju named Knifehead. And as the two of them walk down the halls to suit up, we can see that they are walking perfectly in sync. A subtle way of showing how both of them have grown incredibly close after years of being neurally connected to one another in the drift. Then we are shown the boys getting suited up inside of the Danger cockpit by a team of Shatterdome technicians. And instead of shoving his actors inside of a big old green screen room, Guillermo Del Toro had the cockpit of every Jaeger of the film be a physical set of multiple moving and sparking parts. And when I say moving, I mean moving, as Guillermo would literally have these cockpit sets shake and dip down whenever their respective Jaegers were hit, forcing the actors to literally struggle with gravity as they pretended to pilot. First launched on July 10th, 2017, the Mark III Jaeger Gipsy Danger would weigh around 1,980 tons and stand at 260 feet. So tall that the Statue of Liberty only reaches up to the knees of this giant Jaeger. And if we were to compare the Danger to other famous monster fighting titans from legendary pictures, the Danger would look kinda small, as Godzilla Kong: A New Empire had Godzilla standing at 394 feet and Kong standing at 335 feet. Gipsy Danger actually got its name from the aircraft engine, the de Havilland Gipsy. However, due to that name being a known slur amongst the Romani community, I'll largely just refer to this Jaeger as the Danger for the rest of this video. The exterior of the Danger was also designed after fighter planes used in World War II, and apparently the overall body movements of the Danger was closely modeled after MMA fighter George St. Pierre, who played the Captain America villain Batroc the Leaper in Captain America 2 and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And if you're a fan of the Portal video game series, then you will definitely notice the familiar voice of Ellen McLean in the background, acting as the voice of the Danger's AI system. McLean famously played the comedic villain GLaDOS in both Portal 1 and 2, two video games that Guillermo Del Toro was a massive fan of. So he was pretty damn excited to have her voice included in his movie. But anyways, while attempting to save a boat from being destroyed by the coming Category 3 Kaiju, the boys would whip out the Danger's Plasma Caster, a weapon specifically designed to minimize the spread of toxic Kaiju blue blood by cauterizing the wound at the moment of impact, kinda like a lightsaber in Star Wars. However, the 315-foot, 2,700-ton knife head would withstand those initial plasma blasts from the Danger and unfortunately drag Yancey Beckett out of the Danger's con pod to his death, forcing Raleigh to use all of his strength to solo pilot the Danger and plasma blast knife head to Kingdom Come. Then after we get the title drop, we're jumped forward 5 years to a scene of Idris Elba's Stacker Pentecost having a video call with a number of world leaders, who are all strongly making the case to stop the Jaeger program completely in order to divert funding to the construction of giant walls meant to keep the Kaiju out of various nations. And during the presentation, images of destroyed Jaegers can be seen, including Horizon Brave, which was destroyed in Lima, Peru, and Romeo Blue, which was destroyed in Seattle, Washington. And due to all these Category 4 Kaiju destroying all these Jaegers faster than they can physically be built, Pentecost is informed that the Jaeger project will stop being funded by the countries of the world after a period of 8 months, with all the Jaegers across the world all being relocated to the last operational Shadow Dome in Hong Kong, China. Then we are brought to the construction site of the 300-mile anti-Kaiju wall meant to run down from Alaska all the way down to California. And it's a wall that the construction workers have little faith will ever be completed, as one of these construction workers have apparently graffitied the word never over the estimated completion date originally written on the sign outside of the construction site. And it's there that Raleigh has been working after the loss of his brother 5 years prior. However, it seems like all of Raleigh's efforts have been in vain, as the wall construction workers would all witness the 295-foot tall Category 4 Kaiju named Mutavore tear right on through Australia's Wall of Life with relative ease through the use of its 2,630-ton body. But luckily for Sydney, the Jaeger Striker Eureka was still there to bring Mutavore down. Out of all the Jaegers in this movie, Striker Eureka is the most modern, a Mark V Jaeger standing at 250 feet and weighing 6,650 tons. Striker Eureka is the fastest and most powerful Jaeger of the bunch, equipped with 2 sting blades that heat up to 300 degrees in order to cut Kaijus open and cauterize their wounds at the same time, preventing the spread of their toxic blood. Again, much like lightsabers in Star Wars. The Eureka also has a 6-barrel missile launcher in its chest with 18 missiles worth of ammo, which it used to take down Mutavore in Sydney. A desperate Marshal Pentecost then shows up at Raleigh's place of work to attempt to bring Raleigh back in the fold, as Raleigh was the last remaining experienced Mark III pilot still alive. And after one of Pentecost's rousing speeches, Raleigh then accepts and immediately heads to the Hong Kong Shadow Dome, where he meets up with Pentecost's adoptive daughter, Mako Mori, played by actress Rinko Kikuchi. Born in April 2003, Mako Mori is actually 22 years old at this point in the movie, despite the actress being closer to 31 at the time. Also, fun fact, but Megumi Hayashibara, the voice actress for Mako in the Japanese dub of Pacific Rim, was also famously the voice actor for Rei Ayanami from Neon Genesis Evangelion, one of the most famous mech vs. monster anime of all time. But anyways, soon after this, Raleigh is introduced to Drs. Newton Geisler and Herman Gottlieb, played by Charlie Day and Bern Gorman respectively. And according to Travis Beacham, Newt Geisler's name is a slight nod to renowned big brain scientist Sir Isaac Newton. And when we first meet Newton, he's literally framed in front of a giant kaiju brain before saying that he wants to meet a kaiju up close. Clear foreshadowing towards Newt eventually connecting his brain with the kaiju to get drifted. Raleigh, Mako, and Pentecost then head to the heart of the Shadow Dome itself when Pentecost tells Raleigh of the Jaegers that remain, including the Mark IV Jaeger Crimson Typhoon. Weighing 1,722 tons and standing at 250 feet, the three-armed Crimson Typhoon was first put into operation on August 22, 2018, purposely meant to be piloted by 3 users as opposed to 2, who, in this case, were the famous Wei-Tang triplets Chung, Hu, and Jin Wei. Apparently, it was the production's original vision for Crimson Typhoon to have 4 pilots and 4 arms as opposed to just 3. However, due to the production's difficulty with finding quadruplet actors, they had to settle with 1 less arm and 1 less pilot. And much like a regular Jaeger, the Crimson Typhoon has 2 of the Wei-Tang brothers controlling the left and right hemispheres of the Jaeger's brain and helping the Jaeger physically move about and fight with movements inspired by both Chinese wushu and the legendary boxer Floyd Mayweather Jr. However, unlike a regular Jaeger, the 3rd pilot is solely in charge of Crimson Typhoon's gunning systems, which include its IB-22 plasma caster, a plasma caster that is actually 3 times more devastating than the one found on the Danger. Crimson Typhoon's head is also just one giant eye, a design choice specifically inspired by the HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. And after the Crimson Typhoon, Pentecost then introduces the legendary Mark I Jaeger, Cherno Alpha, built by Russia and piloted by husband and wife Sasha and Alexis Kadanovsky. The heaviest of the Mark I Jaegers to date, Cherno Alpha has a weight of 2,412 tons and stands at 280 feet, the same height of Pentecost's old Jaeger, Coyote Tango. Cherno Alpha was given that name after the Slavic dark mythical god of misfortune, Chernobog, as the Jaeger was originally called Chernobog Alpha in early concept art. And it's a Jaeger that has its design roots in Japanese anime, as the MS-06 Zaku 2 mech from Mobile Suit Gundam was originally the inspiration for the Jaeger during the concept art phase. Cherno Alpha appears headless due to the top of the Jaeger being purposely designed to look akin to a cooling tower of a nuclear power plant to evoke that Chernobyl type of feel. Guillermo Del Toro actually used the Mr. Fusion energy reactor from Back to the Future for inspiration as well, so the head is kind of a hybrid of both of those things. Also, while we're on the subject of Jaegers and nuclear power cores, getting cancer from these Jaegers was a huge risk of the job. Every pilot that has ever piloted a Mark I, Mark II, or Mark III Jaeger takes a drug called methorosin in order to combat the effects of constant radiation exposure. But the drug is not 100% effective, hence why we discover Stacker Pentecost is slowly dying from cancer himself later on in the film. Stacker's first ever Jaeger co-pilot, a woman named Tamsin Sevier, died of cancer from exposure to Coyote Tango's nuclear core. And what sucks about both Stacker and Tamsin's fates is that Stacker and Tamsin both got involved in the Jaeger program in the first place after the death of Stacker's sister Luna, while Luna was defending San Francisco in 2013. As Tamsin was flying alongside her when all of that happened. So both Stacker and Tamsin would end up dying attempting to avenge people that they cared about in a Jaeger, which is likely a big reason why Pentecost was so against a vengeful Mako going anywhere near a Jaeger. Pentecost learned the price of vengeance the hard way, and he didn't want Mako to go through the same thing. Also, he of course knew that Mako's thirst for vengeance would cause her problems in the drift. So Pentecost was honestly just being a good parent. But anyways, being the slowest of all the Jaegers, Cherno Alpha was made to be a super durable machine, which is why it has survived 6 years defending the Siberian Wall of Life. However, because the Russians are so hardcore, they also never even bothered to install a safety ejection mechanism for its pilots, as they believed that their pilots should die if they failed their mission to protect Russia. And it's Russia's involvement in Pentecost's operation that has given Pentecost the lovely gift of a 2,400-pound thermonuclear bomb that humanity plans to strap onto a Jaeger and send through the breach in a special operation known as Operation Pitfall, with the hopes of destroying the Kaiju's home base inside of their home universe called the antiverse. After Dr. Gottlieb predicts the emergence of two Kaiju at once, which would happen when the Kaiju Otachi and Leatherback would obliterate Crimson Typhoon and Cherno Alpha during Operation Pitfall, Newt would attempt to convince Pentecost that drifting with the Kaiju's brain was the only logical way of procuring intel on the antiverse before the operation. However, after being rejected, Newt would tell his scientist partner that fortune favors the bold, a popular saying that has its roots in an old Latin proverb by the ancient Roman poet Virgil, though some do argue that the Greeks came up with the phrase first. Tomato, potato, I say, who gives a shit? What actually matters is that while Newt is going through his insane proposition, the actual Kaiju brain inside of this glass container keeps reaching out its tentacles towards Newt's direction, tapping at the glass like it desperately wants to go forward with Newt's crazy-ass idea. And if you've already seen the sequel to Pacific Rim Uprising, then you already know Newt's horrific fate to come, as his repeated drifts with Kaiju brains would eventually have his own brain infected by the precursors, the very alien race responsible for manufacturing all the cloned Kaiju that come through the breach. So this glass tapping was Guillermo Del Toro's subtle way of foreshadowing the precursors' plans for Newt that director Stephen DeKnight would interpret for the sequel. But anyways, soon after this, Raleigh is reunited with his newly upgraded Danger, with Mako even having added a rocket to the Danger's elbows for stronger punches and retractable chain swords for some fun slicing and or dicing action.
Dices and slices!
And because the Danger's exterior is constantly changing from all the battles that it goes through, the magicians over at Industrial Light and Magic ultimately were forced to develop 21 different versions of the mech to be used over the course of the movie. Then, after a day of showing Raleigh around, Mako reveals that she's been studying his fighting techniques, and that she believes Raleigh isn't the right man for such an important mission due to his unpredictable nature. I really love this moment in particular because it perfectly illustrates why Mako will inevitably end up becoming the left hemisphere of the Danger's brain. Amongst the two of them, Mako is the more logical and analytical, traits linked to the left hemisphere of the human brain, while Raleigh leans more into his intuition and creativity while fighting, with those traits being right brain traits. This is why the two of them end up becoming the best team of Jaeger pilots that end up saving the world. They exemplify two halves of one functional brain. Then, a little later, we see Raleigh walking through the mess hall, passing the Wei Tang brothers, who all have their Crimson Typhoon logos on their backs, modeled after a demon with two elongated fangs. In both China and Japan, demon masks have historically been used to ward off evil and misfortune, as the fierceness of the mask was thought to scare demons away from whoever wore it. Raleigh is then quickly invited by Striker Eureka pilot Herc Hansen to have a meal with him, his son Chuck, and their dog Max. The logo for Striker Eureka actually appears to be modeled after Max himself, as their logo is a bulldog with a missile in its mouth, and on that missile is a little decal of a kangaroo. You know, because they're Australian, and there's no other way to indicate that they're Australian. And during their meal, Chuck accuses Raleigh of being responsible for the fall of the Jaeger program due to him and his brother's failure years ago, before taking off like some type of jerk. Then we head to the Quoon combat room, where Raleigh and Mako eventually face off together and discover that they're drift compatible. But Marshal Pentecost still refuses to let Mako instead of a Jaeger. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, Newt's smart dumb ass is in his lab doing his mad scientist thing, about to drift his mind with a tiny piece of a Kaiju brain using a neural handshake machine that he made in a cave with a box of scraps. And during his drift with the Kaiju, we see a series of flashes from both Newt's life and the brief life of this Kaiju. First, we see what appears to be a young Newt and his father Jacob fishing together before we are jumped forward in time to Newt's time at MIT studying biology with his colleagues, with the implication being that this early memory of catching a fish with his father was what first interested Newt in biology and zoology. and Newt would actually go on to become an expert in artificial tissue replication as a result, which is super impressive. And Newt's obsession with kaiju as an adult is also a major extension of his early memory with his father, because now Newt has become obsessed with fishing for much bigger kaiju fish in the ocean as an adult. This is then followed by images of the kaiju's life, with us seeing images of the kaiju being artificially altered on an alien medical table by the mysterious colonizing race of interdimensional aliens known as the Precursors, who were all seen inspecting all of their kaiju clones in their native universe called the Antiverse in front of a giant sun. Guillermo purposely designed these 12-foot tall precursors to be as terrifying and alien as he could in order to really drive home how far removed they are from our reality. However, right before this vision ends, something interesting happens. A shot of the dead kaiju's eye appears, followed by a shot of Newt's eye getting covered in what appears to be a puff of dark smoke. But when Newt is pulled out of his machine, we learn that this dark smoke was actually blood flowing into Newt's left eye. That moment right there is when I believe the kaiju brain transferred a bit of itself into Newt's mind, foreshadowing Newt's turn of allegiance in Pacific Rim Uprising. A little bit later, when Marshal Pentecost goes to check on Newt, we see Newt's left eye begin to bleed even more as he explains the Precursor's plans to invade Earth, with that left eye symbolically representing the kaiju and Newt's clean right eye representing himself. It's almost like Newt's mind is now a Jaeger being piloted by two entities in a way, which is thematically fitting. And after getting this intel, Pentecost tells Newt that he needs his nerdy ass to blue skidoo into a new kaiju brain pronto. So Pentecost hooks him up with a black market kaiju harvester named Hannibal Chow, played by the legendary Ron Perlman, who has teamed up with Del Toro on a number of projects before this one, including Kronos in 1993, 2002's Blade 2, and Hellboy 1 and 2 in both 2006 and 2008 respectively. However, his role as Hannibal Chow would mark only the second time Perlman played a fully human character in a Del Toro movie since they did Kronos together in 93. When Pentecost pulls up Chow's files, we can see that they have him listed as 6'1", 192 pounds, and age 62, with his last known location being in the corner of Fong and Tull Streets in Hong Kong's Bone Slums, which is where Newt is eventually sent by Pentecost to pick up a new kaiju brain. Then, after Pentecost allows Mako to be Raleigh's co-pilot, the two begin running tests together inside of the Danger Jaeger, only for Mako to get completely lost in the sauce of her traumatic memories. Del Toro brings the audience into Mako's memories by blacking out the background behind Mako and making it rain ash from the past inside of the cockpit. And with the background still darkened, we see an adult Mako walking down a street of Tokyo, Japan, with the audience only being able to see Tokyo itself within the reflection of Mako's visor at first, before the red shoe from her childhood materializes in her hands. And the very moment that Mako looks at this shoe, her mind immediately transforms her back into her lost child self as she relives Onibaba's attack on Tokyo on May 15th, 2016. And super weird fact about this scene, but Mako is apparently supposed to be 13 years old during this flashback sequence. However, this young Mako actress, Mana Ashida, was only 9 years old in this scene. So I'm not sure why they cast a 9-year-old to play a 13-year-old that acts like a 5-year-old, but hey, we all make mistakes. And heavily crustacean in appearance, Onibaba is a 2,040-ton kaiju standing at 188 feet tall. Onibaba's name in Japanese means demon hag or evil devil woman, and Onibaba would end up murdering Mako's parents while they were in Tokyo getting special cancer treatment for Mako's father. And Mako's parents actually bought Mako those red shoes that very day, and it would be Mako losing one of those shoes while running away from the kaiju that would actually save her from being crushed by Onibaba like her parents were that day. So technically, her parents saved her life. However, despite the appearance of Pentecost Jaeger's Coyote Tango to save the day, Mako's unresolved fear of Onibaba would still cause her to accidentally activate the plasma cannons on the Danger, causing everyone in the Shatter Dome to have to evacuate while Tendo and her quickly shut down Mako's neural connection. Then the viewers are brought to the Bone Slums of Hong Kong, where Newt follows a series of clues to find himself at Hannibal Chow's secret illegal base of kaiju harvesting operations. And at the front desk of this establishment is a wizened man played by actor Santiago Segura, one of Guillermo's close friends that he loves to include in his movies, like he did in Blade 2 and both Hellboy films. Newt is then led to a secret room behind some shelves and is confronted by Chow himself, sporting some fancy-ass gold-tipped shoes. Shoes that Ron Perlman was actually allowed to bring home with him after his time on set. However, unfortunately for these shoes, they would eventually be remade into a golden pair of heels by his first wife. Hannibal Chow then reveals that Hannibal Chow isn't even his real name, as he named himself after the famous ancient Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca, as well as his favorite Szechuan restaurant from Brooklyn, New York. Hannibal wears these fancy sunglasses in order to hide a giant scar that he received after a trip to a public kaiju shelter messed up his left eye real damn bad. And this is why, when the kaijus Otachi and Leatherback head to Hong Kong to specifically kill that nosy-ass nerd Newt for drifting with the kaiju hive mind, that Hannibal chooses to go to a private kaiju bunker instead. And in response to this sudden attack, Pentecost sends China's Crimson Typhoon, Russia's Cherno Alpha, and Australia's Striker Eureka to run defense against these two massive Category 4 kaiju. The first kaiju to emerge is the flying female kaiju Otachi, who stands at 207 feet tall. And though yes, it is not polite to discuss another woman's weight, Otachi is a bit of a big bitch at 2,690 tons. Otachi also has a super spiky tail with a giant claw on it that it would use to murder the pilots of Crimson Typhoon with relative ease. And inside of Otachi's mouth is a sack of extremely corrosive acid that Otachi would then use to melt the hull of Cherno Alpha. And seeing their comrades in danger, Striker Eureka would disobey their orders to guard Hong Kong to attempt to save them, only for the 2,900-ton Leatherback to show up out of nowhere to absolutely wreck and brutally finish off Cherno Alpha. Standing at 267 feet tall, Leatherback is a kaiju closely modeled after a gorilla, with movements similar to that of the world-famous titan King Kong. But what makes Leatherback unique from the kaiju that we've seen so far is its ability to generate a devastating miles-wide EMP blast, which we see him use as soon as he recognizes that Striker Eureka was about to use their air missiles on Otachi. I found that moment extremely interesting because it demonstrates that these kaiju indeed operate with one singular hive mind. So Leatherhead likely tapped into the memories of the dead kaiju that fought Striker Eureka in the past back in Sydney in order to foresee Eureka's favorite kaiju killing move. And it's also super interesting how, after the EMP disabled Striker Eureka completely, Otachi doesn't choose to finish the Jaeger off, instead beelining it straight to Newt's location at the public kaiju shelter. This to me shows that these kaiju are programmed to follow specific orders by their precursor superiors no matter what, only stopping to fight Jaegers when necessary. But anyways, after the Hansons make a final attempt to stop Leatherback by shooting flares in its face, in comes the Danger to save the day, arriving on the scene in an almost holy way as the helicopters carrying the Jaeger shine a bright ass light behind the Danger like it was an angel of deliverance or something. And together, Mako and Raleigh battle Leatherback, making the incredibly smart choice to rip off its EMP sacks off of its back immediately before pumping its stomach with plasma cannon blasts. And this is super random, but I truly love the fights in this Pacific Rim movie more so than its sequel, because Guillermo Del Toro truly made both Jaegers and kaiju feel like these massive, larger-than-life titans with a ton of weight to them. And not only is the sound design absolutely brilliant in this film, with every gear and piston making audible sounds to make these Jaegers feel like real devastating war machines, but Del Toro also complements this by always maintaining a sense of scale, deliberately choosing to shoot fights from the perspective of a civilian on the surface looking upwards as titans clash all around them. Also, the choice to make every movement of these titans relatively slow did wonders to adding power to every punch that they threw at one another, because it makes the audience see how strenuous it is to move thousands of tons of weight around. The sequel Pacific Rim Uprising, while it did have its fun moments, failed to replicate any of this. Because they chose to make the Jaegers in that movie significantly faster and more agile, the sense of weight is completely lost, and the audience barely gets to hear any of the sound effects that come from the Jaegers struggling to move their weight around. And because of this, the fights of Pacific Rim Uprising feel more akin to a PlayStation 5 video game than a realistic looking battle. especially since none of the Jaeger pilots in the sequel cared as much about minimizing damage to the cities of the world as much as the pilots do in this movie. Like watching the Danger carefully walk through the streets of Hong Kong, trying their absolute best to not knock any buildings down with its massive mechanically buzzing body, did so much in both showcasing the physical weight of their Jaeger as well as underscoring that with great power comes great responsibility. This type of carefulness and caution is non-existent in Pacific Rim Uprising, and because of that, none of the fights feel particularly realistic or worth caring about, because the heroes are causing just as much damage to the cities because of all of their unrealistically agile jumping and flipping around. Like, the fights in this first movie almost feel like a strategic game of chess between two titans, while the action in Uprising just feels like you're watching somebody else play a video game while they ignore the main objective of protecting the city. I don't know, just an observation. But anyways, what is absolutely freaking nuts about this fight on the streets of Hong Kong between the Danger and Otachi is that everything on this screen is 100% computer generated by the wizards at Industrial Light and Magic. Like, this isn't CG monsters and mechs overlaid over footage of Hong Kong. Like, this entire scene is 100% fake. However, there are some moments during the battle where Guillermo Del Toro made sure to use practical effects. You know, like when the Danger accidentally punches through an office building. For this moment, the production actually built an entire miniature set that they physically smashed through in order to achieve this super fun shot.
There's a shot where Gipsy punches her fist into a building. We decided to approach that with miniature work, and we went to 3210 Studios, which is here in San Rafael.
For the sequence, we created, I believe, 14 fully realized cubicles. What we were able to do was print a lot of the elements on the 3D printer. We had practical scale lighting on set. We had the drop ceilings. We had to come up with material engineering to make sure that everything broke according to the way that a real thing would break. As this mandrel came through, it creates this randomness that is inherent in the real world.
And we also get another reference to Sir Isaac Newton when the Danger's fist hilariously sets off a Newton's cradle in the office. Newton's cradle is of course named after Sir Isaac Newton, as it illustrates his laws of motion, particularly the conservation of momentum and the principle of action and reaction. When one ball swings and hits the other balls, the momentum is transferred through that line of balls, showing how forces and motion interact, as per Isaac Newton's second and third laws. But anyways, after the Danger freezes Otachi's claw tail and smashes it clean off, Otachi spreads its wings and takes the Danger on a ride to the upper atmosphere, triggering Mako to whip out the Danger's handy-dandy steel obsidian swords that she added to the upgraded Danger to slice that flying acid reflux rat back to hell where it belongs. And after being saved from Otachi by the Danger, Newt then heads back to Hannibal's place and demands that he gets that new kaiju brain to drift in ASAP. The two then head to the site of Otachi's remains, where we can see Hannibal's crew removing the kaiju skin mites off of Otachi's body in order to sell them for later. These skin mites are basically kaiju lice from the antiverse that usually die not long after their kaiju host does. However, Hannibal discovered that soaking these little bugs in ammonia allows them to survive even longer. But Hannibal's crew would also quickly discover that Otachi was big time pregnant before she died, leading to Otachi's baby to emerge from the dead kaiju stomach to feast on Hannibal's crew and eventually Hannibal himself. But don't worry, during the movie's mid-credit scene, we of course see Hannibal somehow alive and well after he cuts himself out of the baby's stomach. I mean, usually kaiju blue proves to be incredibly radioactive and cancer-inducing, but I guess Hannibal is just too damn cool for radiation poisoning. But when this baby kaiju dies from being choked by its own umbilical cord, Newt now has a fresh new kaiju brain in order to drift in. But this time, his lab partner Dr. Gottlieb wants to drift alongside him, not only to help Newt share the neural load, but to also get answers as to why only 2 new kaiju have just shown up near the breach as opposed to the 3 kaiju that his math predicted. When the 2 nerds first enter the drift, the first images we see are of a young Herman playing with a toy fighter jet, showing how his early interest in war technology got him involved with the Jaeger program in the first place. In fact, Herman would go on to write the coding for the first generation of Mark I Jaegers when the program first started up. Then an image of an adult newt attending some sort of protest randomly appears, followed by images of a childhood Herman being the little child math genius that he is, as his high IQ appears to have allowed him to attend college at a young age. But it seems Herman did not have such a great time at college, as we can see his adult colleagues there laughing at him after he writes an equation on a whiteboard. And we can see this same young Herman on the ground crying not long after this in response to getting bullied by all of those grown-ass men who felt real cool after bullying a child. What the hell is their problem, man? Then after this, we see an adult newt getting the tattoo of the Kaiju Yamarashi on his arms before flashes of the entrance to the precursor's antiverse appears on the screen, letting both Newt and Herman know that Kaiju DNA is absolutely required in order for anything to come across the interdimensional breach. Legendary Pictures also applied this same rule in their Godzilla King Kong Monsterverse when it came to wormhole travel to and from the Hollow Earth dimension, as an escort from a titan like King Kong was always necessary in order for the humans to use those wormholes. And this may not be such a huge coincidence on Legendary's part, considering that this production company has been mulling over a crossover between Pacific Rim and the Godzilla Monsterverse for quite some time now. So much so that the Kaiju knife head from Pacific Rim can be seen graffitied on a wall in Godzilla Kong: A New Empire, and the blueprint for the yellow beast glove that Kong wears in that movie is actually the same blueprint for the Danger's arm. So the fact that both of these universes have the same set of Kaiju wormhole rules could indicate that we could see these portals used as a means to cross over these two universes someday. Because who doesn't want to see King Kong team up with some Jaegers, man? People that hate fun, that's who. But anyways, because Papa Hansen's arm got hurt during their scuffle with Leatherback, Pentecost himself elects to pilot Striker Eureka in his stead. And together with the Danger, they enact Operation Pitfall as they head to the breach with their nuclear payload in tow. But guarding the breach thanks to their connection with Newt are the Category 4 Kaiju, Scunner, and Raiju. The 440-foot tall Scunner weighs 3,230 tons and is purposely designed like a bull, whereas the 358-foot tall Raiju weighs around 3,475 tons and looks more akin to a crocodile. So much so that the production would actually refer to Raiju as Croc most of the time. Raiju's name is actually derived from the Japanese name for a mythological beast made of lightning, while Scunner's name is actually a Scottish word for something disgusting. Scunner is actually the biggest Category 4 Kaiju in the film, while Raiju is easily the fastest, as both of these Jaegers quickly find out when they go head-to-head with both of these Kaiju. But these two new Kaiju pale in comparison to the biggest and fastest Kaiju of the film that emerges during their battle, the Category 5 Kaiju known as Slattern. And while they never actually use Slattern's name in the movie, the Pacific Rim novelization actually reveals that it was Pentecost who names the Kaiju himself after Tendo calls the Kaiju quote-unquote a big bitch. And for those of you who don't know, the term slattern was a mean word used in the 17th century to refer to a woman who liked to sleep around. I'm not sure why this Kaiju gets the name Slattern when we literally just saw Otachi give birth in Hong Kong with no baby daddy present. Shit's fucked up, man. But anyways, Slattern's design was inspired by traditional depictions of the devil, with the Chernobog from Disney's Fantasia being the most influential. And after a fierce struggle, the Danger ends up cutting Raiju clean in half before Striker Eureka decides to prematurely detonate their nuclear payload in order to neutralize Scunner and Slattern so Raleigh and Mako can overload the Danger's nuclear core after they pass through the breach. This, of course, kills Pentecost and Chuck in the process, which is only half sad because Chuck was a stupid bitch and I hate him. Somehow surviving that blast, a wounded Slattern tries to stop the Danger from entering the antiverse, but after a final chest blast from the Danger, Slattern's corpse ends up being used by the Danger as the genetic key to get through the breach itself. And after they get through that breach, they enter a heavily electrified area that appears to be completely biological in nature, with all of these firing bolts of electricity almost looking like the firing of alien neurons of some kind. And seeing as two people are not required to make a heroic sacrifice, Raleigh would eject an unconscious Mako's escape pod pod, sending her back through the breach and safely to the surface of the ocean. And as Raleigh unlatches himself to manually overload the dangerous reactor, we can see why Guillermo Del Toro made these cockpits massive rooms of dangerous technology. Del Toro has said that he purposely made every Jaeger cockpit huge because he wanted to evoke a sense of danger. Because when the Jaeger gets damaged, the pilots now have to navigate through a nightmare of broken technology that might kill them if they're not careful. And one of the biggest challenges that the production had was actually physically building these cockpits that were able to withstand gallons upon gallons of water pouring onto them without electrocuting anyone with all the internal wiring and sparks flying about. But all's well that ends well, as nobody on set got electrocuted, as Raleigh did his hero thing by detonating his Jaeger right in the faces of some precursors after ejecting himself to safety. And it's truly wild to think that Aaron Paul, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Luke Bracey, and Taylor Kitsch were all considered for the role of Raleigh at one point, because I could not see anyone but Charlie Hunnam playing this role. He did such a good job that it was a damn shame that he did not come back for the sequel, because though they won the battle by closing the breach in this movie, the Kaiju War was far, far from over. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this breakdown for the 2013 film Pacific Rim. What do you guys think about this movie? Let us know in the comment section down below. You guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, YouTube, Blue Sky, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button and maybe hitting that like button if you guys like the video. And hey, just a quick reminder, but do not forget to hit up the Heavy Spoilers store to pick up some sweet Heavy Spoilers merch for you and your closest family member. We got some really great stuff over there. But yes, like always, you guys are amazing individuals for taking the time to watch this video, and I appreciate you guys very much, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.